This is Jake Funk, Super Bowl champion running back for your LA Rams, and you're listening to the Best Bell Fantasy.
All right, welcome into the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Bradley Stalder. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. And yes, that was Super Bowl champion running back Jake Funk giving the introduction. Today, Derek Brown from FantasyPros joins me. We're going to talk some running back rankings, and I'm excited to get talking about them. It's about this time of year where we get to get more reports from camp and OTAs and start seeing more of the depth chart and fake news and all that. But Derek, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll get into these running back rankings here.
Brad, I'm stoked, man. We've been in the DMs talking about this for a minute and stuff. Apologies for the wait, man. Life comes at you fast sometimes, but I'm excited, man. We're gonna chop it up. We're gonna talk my differences versus consensus, some of it and stuff like that. And look, everybody's got a process, and unfortunately, like, social media might not like mine at times, but you stand by it, man. Everybody's got a way that we diagnose and we examine the game, and you do it long enough and you see that it works, you stand by it, dude. So I'm excited to talk about some running backs today.
If you're not following Derek on Twitter, make sure you are at DBro_FFB. You can find his rankings on FantasyPros among the other expert rankers there. Derek, we'll kick it off. You already at the running back one spot are already off to a hot start. You do not have Jonathan Taylor at your 101. I feel like you need to explain yourself already.
Come on, man. Like, everybody is all over Jonathan Taylor. And I don't hate the guy. He's RB2. But the thing about it is that there are sharp people in this industry that I follow. I trust their injury advice. When all that comes down, a lot of these things, yes, it sucked to draft Christian McCaffrey at the 101, the 102 over the last few seasons. And then to watch him miss large chunks of the year and to watch all your best ball teams go up and smoke. But that still doesn't mean that he's not still the best player on the board. I mean, look, even if they dial his snaps back, we saw this play out last year. He becomes a 60-70% snap player. You're talking about better version of Austin Eckler, same version of Austin Eckler, a guy who's still going to get all the money touches. He's still elite as far as a receiver. Even last year, he was top 3 in yards per run at the running back position. For me, when he's on the field, and if the only way that I could take him out of the RB1 spot is if we're projecting injury. Well, we're not doing that. And sharp people I talked about, like, that I follow, have said that a lot of these injuries of the last few seasons have been fluky. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey's got to be on my 101, man.
Fluky and non-predictive. I think that that's something that, like, fantasy players have to come to grips with, because we have been burned over the last couple of years drafting him that early. And maybe this is reinforcing the anchor running back or hero running back draft strategy, that you don't want to invest so much draft capital in players that, yeah, they might be injured, but they also play running back. Like, the running back position tends to get injured more. And it's unfortunate that it was Christian McCaffrey the last couple of years, but maybe it's Jonathan Taylor this year. Maybe it's Dalvin Cook or Derrick Henry. Like, all of those running backs in that first round, even the early second round, have injury history or injury questions, except I don't think we've had much of a Taylor issue. So He's your 102. But I think that that's, pretty much consensus is you have McCaffrey and Taylor 1 and 2. At 3, though, the consensus among the FantasyPros rankers is Derrick Henry, but you have him at 10. And I'm also pretty low on Derrick Henry, and I'll give you 5 reasons, one for each of the screws in his foot. But do you have other reasons why Derrick Henry is ranked significantly lower than your peers?
I mean, it's a lot of different factors, and it's how you approach rankings. Like, when people come to the site, they look at your rankings. one of the ways that, and this is just one of my approaches to ranking in general, is when people look at my ranks and then they look at it versus ADP on best ball sites, whatever sites that they're drafting on for the redraft leagues, whatever. I want you to either be above or below consensus versus the field on certain players. Where I have Derrick Henry ranked, you're not going to get a lot of him. You're just not. And that's fine. And maybe he buries me, and that's one of the bets that I'm making this year. But for me, it's not just that, am I making the bet that Derrick Henry, that age and the workload and all these different things catch up with him. It's also that if he doesn't hold up under this massive workload, if the Titans' offense is putrid, which it looked like for multiple spots of last year. I mean, outside of Derrick Henry, who are we hanging our hat on in this offense? Treylon Burks?
Nick Westbrook,
he's a rookie. Yeah, exactly. Austin Hooper, Robert Woods, who was a declining player even before the ACL. So, and we're supposed to believe in the play calling of Todd Downing, who is terrible. The thing about it is that it's not so much just Derrick Henry shade. It's the fact that I like a lot of other running backs over Derrick Henry. And yeah, maybe he buries me. Maybe Derrick Henry goes on and has the most touches in the NFL. He holds up for a full schedule this season and he just crushes me. My hopes and dreams and what we saw to begin last year, because I faded Derrick Henry last year, happens over an entire season and I'm just crying in my pillow. But the other side of the coin is we could see the drop-off. We could see the drop-off in his efficiency due to workload, due to age. And we also could see a less efficient Titans offense, which is not hard to squint and see that possibility. And so we know the pass game usage is not for Henry. If this is a worse offense, a less efficient offense, then could Derrick Henry, and I don't have him ranked outside of the top 12, like I'm not insane, but if he finishes as the RB10, RB12, as opposed to a top 3, top 4, top 5 back, which the previous seasons, he has needed historic workloads to get there. He ran for 2,000 freaking yards, and he still wasn't the RB1 overall in fantasy. So, I mean, like, you're talking about a legendary season, he still didn't crush people in the sense that he was the number one running back that you had to have. So, yeah, I'll make that bet. It's fine.
Especially in full PPR leagues, he hasn't had 20 receptions in a season, a very low target share, and Ryan Tannehill, like, he was okay, but you mentioned the inefficiencies. They were historically efficient the previous couple years before Arthur Smith left. So, yep. Yeah, I'm expecting that Derrick Henry, that is also a player that I'm lower on versus consensus. But a player that you and I disagree upon pretty significantly, you have him at 3 right now. I have him as a second round value, and that's Dalvin Cook. And I mean, I could give my reasons, but I want to hear yours first, and then I'll push back a little bit, see if we can get a little bit of a debate going on Dalvin Cook.
Okay. So after I looked into Dalvin Cook's numbers is really what made me kind of gravitate more, because I wasn't going towards Cook in a lot of my best ball drafts at this time of the year. And after diving through the numbers, looking at this offense and stuff, I think that there is a range of outcomes, a pretty decent range of outcomes where Dalvin Cook could be the number one RB overall this season. We've seen him lead the league in rushing in two of the last 3 seasons. Dude, he's been RB2 in 2 of the last 3 seasons. Now we're talking about, okay, the offensive line wasn't great last year. Don't project it to be worse. If anything, maybe we get a return to the mean and it's better. This offense was up pace and up tempo and passing rates last year. And so we've already heard come out of Vikings camp, they're going to pass. They're going to be up tempo. If I think that the scheme can't get any worse and it gets a little bit better under O'Connell, which I don't think it could be any worse than it was last year. I don't think they were atrocious, but they weren't one of the best offenses in the league in terms of scheme and how they were running things. And the other part about Dalvin Cook is in 2 of the last 3 seasons, he has been an elite receiver at the running back position. He's been top 12 in yards per route run in 2 of the last 3 years. We saw that drop off last year as well as his target share. And you marry all of this fact with Dalvin Cook was incredibly unlucky in the touchdown department. incredibly unlucky. Like if you look at all the running backs that are near the top and inside the 5 touches, Dalvin Cook was 2 to 3 touchdowns below all of these guys. Like you're looking at, he had 3 touchdowns inside the 5. All the guys near the top of it, I want to say like the top 10 or 12 inside the 5 touches, had 5 touchdowns. And that 2 touchdown difference might not sound like a lot, but that is going to make the difference between him maybe being the RB2 versus the RB1, the RB7 versus the RB5 or 6, if we're splitting hairs here. So if I'm talking about a running back that has legit been top 3, almost RB1 in 2 of the last 3 seasons, as well as the target share comes back, the receiving workload comes back, and everybody talks about the injuries. Dude's played at least 13 games in each of the last 3 years. So what are we really talking about here? If all these things come to fruition, there's an easy range of outcomes where Dalvin Cook could be the RB1 in fantasy, because he's almost done it in a very short time span in his previous history.
Yeah, I see that. And Dalvin Cook, as you mentioned, over the last couple of years, running back 2 in fantasy points per game in full PPR. Even last season, you mentioned a decrease in target share, still hit almost a 12% target share in a Vikings offense that was middle paced. Like they weren't running a lot of plays, but they weren't like Seattle or Atlanta. So, but I expect this year they'll be faster paced and probably more efficient with Kirk Cousins, the new offensive coordinator O'Connell, passing it. I think though that it's going to move toward more passing to the wide receivers, and maybe a role kind of like Cam Akers. And that's why I could see like Dalvin Cook being on this elite, like pretty strong offense, and the Vikings making a push for the playoffs, a team like that. But he's on the last year of his deal. They might run him into the ground. You mentioned that it's 13, 14 games played over the last few years. Like, I don't think the injury argument is like, I don't think Dalvin Cook is injury prone, but he'll be 27 by the time the season starts, in the middle of his second contract, and they don't have any incentive to use, to lessen his load especially the beginning of the season. So like from a best ball perspective, he might be more of a week 17 fade than a like season long. Like if you're in season long tournaments, like if you're in a drafters season long tournament, I think Dalvin Cook is more valuable in that type of tournament than, expecting him to last all the way into the last game of the season.
Well, I mean, the other thing, if you're building in week 17 correlations, it's not hard to sit here and make up some of that equity. Like, depending on where you're at with best ball and stuff like that, especially if you're doing underdog drafts and stuff like that, it's so wide receiver heavy that I think really my approach with that, and even if he doesn't make it to week 17, you scattershot running back options with your final 2 to 3 picks, and if you hit on any of those darts, maybe it makes up for the week 17 if he is possibly out. So.
Right. Okay, let's keep rolling. There are a few others that I'm interested in picking your brain on here. The consensus is 7 for Najee Harris, but you have him at 4. I love getting Najee Harris at the back end of the first round. Talk about volume, and an improved Pittsburgh offense. I'm assuming that's going to be your argument, but talk to us about Najee Harris.
I mean, he's younger Christian McCaffrey, dude. Like, we know that Najee Harris is going to get a massive target share. We know he's not coming off the field. Yes, I know they've talked about pulling him off the field, but legit, he played like almost 100% of snaps last year. So if he goes down to 80% and we get, again, full season of Najee, who the frick cares, man? Who cares? It's the same argument with Christian McCaffrey. It's like, okay, well, he doesn't have to play 100% of the snaps. If his snap per touch rate is still incredibly high, which it can be, because they're sure as hell not going to use Benny Snell inside the goal line. They're not going to use Benny freaking Snell in the passing game. There are some
Anthony
other guys
McFarland.
down the depth. Yeah, I mean, look, the rest of these guys on this roster, and I'm hot for dynasty purposes. I'm higher than most on Mateo Durant and Jalen Warren. Like, I will take late shots with them. In best ball, I've had them stashed on taxi squads. I think that there are easy cases where they can jump up this depth chart, be the RB2. But again, they're both UDFAs. Who the hell is taking work away from Najee Harris? So if we do see touchdowns come back. Like if touchdowns are a big part of Najee, because he didn't score a ton of them last year, he still gets the same type of volume, even if it's lower, because I understand his workload last year is not reproducible. Like, we don't want that for Najee. Like, it's Derrick Henry level-esque. We don't really want that for Najee. Like, I want him to be healthy for the entirety of the season. I think that he is going to get a massive workload, but even if he goes from legendary proportions, 380 touches to 350, that's still a crap ton of work. And if we're talking about the baseline of this offense, like last year was your median range of outcomes. Even if you paint that picture, it's Pittsburgh's offense last year was the median. They were terrible as far as red zone scoring attempts per game. That, I think, comes up, even if we're talking about median projections. Even if they don't jump up to 12, 13, top 10, top 8. If they even jump from, because they were, I want to say they were in the 20 to 22nd range off the top of my head. If they jump even to league average, maybe slightly above league average, and we're talking about more scoring chances, because I don't think that Trubisky starts this year, and dear Lord, if he starts, then the Steelers just burn a first-round pick. They should have never drafted Kenny Pickett, because if Kenny Pickett can't beat out Mitchell Trubisky for the starting job in Week 1, that tells you all you need to know about Kenny Pickett, and no, it's not just a rookie thing. It's the fact that Mitchell Trubisky is not good. He's terrible. He's legit one of the bottom 5 quarterbacks in the NFL from a starting perspective right now, bottom 3. If he can't beat him out, then we got some serious problems. But right now, I'm projecting that Pickett does start. He starts early, and this offense, even in median projection ranges, is going to be a little bit improved. And if it's a little bit improved, when we're talking about more red zone chances per game, and nobody's taking work away from Najee, then you're talking about Christian McCaffrey, but you don't need a top 5 pick to get him. And the range of outcomes that Najee Harris, like, I have, there are only a few guys in that tier 1. It's CMC, Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, and Najee. And those are really, when I say they're my tier 1, if I'm making bets and I'm telling you these are the guys that, here's the short list of guys that I think that have the highest probability of being the RB1 in fantasy, I think Najee has that in his range of outcomes, and that's why I place him where I am.
Yeah, increasing the touchdowns would definitely get him there. He gets the passing work, and I don't know if I'm that bullish on Kenny Pickett, but Mitchell Trubisky,
Trubisky's terrible. I'm sorry, all the Truth Bisky people, he's terrible.
Look, I'm no Truth Bisky. Let's get that out of the way. But we've seen some spike weeks over the course of the time with the Chicago Bears for Trubisky. I wonder if they're going to let Pickett get the start right off the bat. They did pay Trubisky only backup money. So it's only a matter of time for Trubisky to give it up, but I wonder when that's going to be. Maybe I'm not as confident it's going to be Week 1, but that's still going to mean a lot of targets for Najee Harris if it's a rookie getting a lot of the starts, and same thing with Pat Freiermuth, I think. So let's keep going, because I love the Najee love. You're also really high on Saquon Barkley, although consensus has him at a running back 15. He's running back 7. Look, I think I'm going to have to get more Saquon Barkley, because the offense is probably going to be a lot better. He's going to catch a lot of passes from Daniel Jones. The wide receiver core is still a little suspect, I think. And Barkley's probably the best receiving option on that offense. So, talk to me about Saquon Barkley. Is this a ranking of you think this is where he's going to be, or a ranking of I just want more of him than my peers?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. Okay. Like, and I'm trying to tread lightly in the sense that I think that you can make an easy case that he should be up there in tier 1. And I don't have him there, again. But I think you can make an easy case. Because, again, we talked about the bias of injuries and stuff with Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
The same thing holds true for Saquon Barkley. The guy tore his ACL. He's had a run of fluke injuries. He played through injury last year. Broken offense. We know all of those narratives, okay? If Saquon Barkley is healthy, this offensive line could quietly go from being one of the league's worst last year, which they were 31st in adjusted line yards last year. They could go from being one of the league's worst run blocking lines to one of the best. And that's not hyperbole. For everybody listening at home, I'm not being hyperbolic about saying that, because they have reformed this entire offensive line. We've heard stuff out of camp that they're going to go back to more zone running. That is Saquon Barkley's bread and butter. Get away from this damn gap and power scheme bullshit that Joe Judge tried to pull from New England. That's not Barkley's game, man. Take advantage of his lateral agility and his explosiveness. And it's not just the rumors that they're going to do this. We've seen it in their free agent additions. Like, Brad, they have brought in awesome guys to fit this scheme. John Feliciano was bad last year, but if you go back to 2020, top 20 zone run blocking guard. Glinski that they added from the Colts, again, last year, he was a top 20 zone and run blocking guard. Now you talk about Andrew Thomas is a good run blocking tackle, and oh my lord, they added Evan Neal to plow the road. This could be a top 10 run blocking offensive line quite easily if all the parts and pieces are healthy and they hit. So, talking about that is what Saquon Barkley is going to be running behind this year. Now you add in better offense, better pace, better play designs, more passing, thus more targets, to a guy that you look back before last year and the previous seasons when he's been healthy. He's been top 10 in yards after contact per attempt. He's been top 10 in yards per route run amongst the running back position. He's still young, and all these other stars are aligning for Saquon Barkley. Yeah, man, like I think that, honestly, in his range of outcomes, could he be the RB1 overall in fantasy this year? Yes. Is the offense probably good enough to get him there outside of them running a ton inside the goal line? No. So that's why I don't have him in tier 1, but I want to be bullish on him, and I don't think that this is just me being above consensus. Saquon Barkley is a really good talent. This team is going to be better this year. So while this might look like crazy sauce to a lot of people, I really don't think it is, and I don't think it's a hot take.
I mean, things couldn't get any worse for Saquon Barkley, let's be honest. He was splitting carries with Devontae Booker last year. I mean, they ended the season with the same number of rushing yards, but you mentioned he was playing through injury, coming off of the ACL. He wasn't even supposed to play like the first 4 weeks, and yet they threw him out, I think, week 2 to start. Like, that's not what you do when you're trying to get your players back to full health. We saw that mismanagement, similar issue with Odell Beckham on the Browns. They rushed him back from the ACL just to get him back on the field. And now Odell Beckham, well, he tore his ACL again, but we saw some big time flashes after, more than a full year recovery from those injuries. And I could see that path for Saquon Barkley getting the receiving work. And there's also like what tight end is going to get those targets. Because typically your wide receivers are going to get 65% of the targets. Running back, tight ends are going to get 40% or so. But Evan Ingram is gone, and they're replacing him with Ricky Seals-Jones. Like, a lot more of those targets, those types of targets close to the line of scrimmage, are going to go to Barkley. So I could see it, especially in a full PPR.
I mean, the crux of the issue with Barkley is people are scared of the injuries and they don't know what to make out of the Giants offense. That is reflected in ADP because all the rest of the Giants players outside of Barkley are being left for dead in drafts. And I'm not telling you that Kenny Golladay is going to be good or that Sterling Shepard's going to come back and be healthy by any stretch of the imagination. But can Kadarius Toney be good? Yeah, absolutely he can be. Can Wan'Dale Robinson surprise people this year? Yeah, absolutely he can. As well as, even if they wanted to go the free agent route, which I don't think they do because they have enough depth at the wide receiver position, there are other parts or pieces like Will Fuller and stuff out there that they can add if they chose to. I don't think that the Giants do that. This is all to say that Saquon Barkley, we haven't even talked about going down narrative street, Brad. He's in a contract year. The man wants to get paid. And so I'm not saying that okay, he's been injured and magically he'll be healthy for a contract season, but you don't have a lot of better motivation outside of, yes, we want to play good and you're competitive and all these different things for professional athletes. But you better, I mean, look, you bet your ass that he needs and he wants to get the bag, if not from the Giants, but from somebody else. So he's got all the motivation in the world, one, to prove the haters wrong, and two, to sit here and get a good contract. So I'm all in on Saquon Barkley, man. Like, I'm not going to sit here, and I threw a tweet out the other day about find out where the bias are, both in your leagues or fantasy Twitter or the community, what have you, and exploit them. And the whole thing that everybody points to every year is, oh, he's been injured. Oh, I've been burned by him. If we were talking about a has-been 29-year-old running back, 30-year-old wide receiver, 32-year-old wide receiver, 31-year-old tight end, we'd be having a very, very different conversation right now.
Right.
But we're not. He's 25. He's in a contract season. Like,
he's
why?
pre-Apex. He's, more than a full year removed from the ACL. The stars are aligning for Saquon Barkley.
Agreed. Couldn't agree more.
A couple, I'm going to throw two players your way because you're higher than consensus on both of them, but they're on the same team. And that's Elijah Mitchell and Tyrion Davis-Price. Tyrion Davis-Price, you have ranked at 36. Consensus is 55. Elijah Mitchell, you have at 21, ranking 26. So both of those players, San Francisco 49ers, we've seen what they can do with running the ball. And we've seen what the Baltimore Ravens could do with a run heavy and a rushing quarterback, opening up lanes, increasing efficiency. Is that the narrative that you're buying into with the 49ers, Trey Lance, plus these running backs equals fantasy goodness?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about it is that Tyrion Davis-Price should not be nearly as late as he is. Depending on any format. He should not be going as late as he went in Dynasty rookie drafts. He should not be going as late as he did or he is in best ball and things of that nature. It's because people, again, we're talking about bias, Brad. People are tired of getting burned by San Francisco running backs. Yep. Everybody went all in on Trey Sermon. I was there. I felt the pain. I had a lot of Trey Sermon in best ball last year. It did not serve me well.
No.
And the thing about it is like, do we walk away from some of these things and learn a lesson? Okay, a lot of people will say, I learned the lesson. I will never trust a San Francisco running back, and I don't trust Kyle Shanahan. Okay, that's fine. You do you, boo-boo. You do you. That's fine. I'm not going to shy away from a productive offense, an offense that tells us they want to run the damn ball. And outside of last year, when Elijah Mitchell gobbled up all the freaking work, you look at opportunity shares, snap shares, volume.
He got 20-plus carries almost every game.
Ton of it. And that's not how San Francisco has typically run their running back situation. They split up work a little bit more. And maybe Elijah Mitchell is the guy this year. But the thing about it is that there is a lot of risk with both of these running backs. But, Brad, it's baked into their damn ADPs,
right,
man. It's baked in. Like, you're not having to draft Elijah Mitchell inside the top 2 to 3 rounds of any damn draft. It's baked in. So,
yeah,
the risk you're absorbing it when you draft them already. But the upside isn't baked in, man. It's not baked in at all for either one of these players. So if Tyrion Davis-Price takes over as being the guy, you bet your ass I want to be at 36 over 55. And the same thing with Elijah Mitchell. If he reprises the role, because I'm not leaving him for dead, although I'm a little bit lower on Elijah Mitchell. I'd have to go back and look at where I'm at versus consensus with him. Maybe I'm higher, maybe I'm lower. I honestly couldn't tell you right now. But where I have him ranked, I have him in a tier of running backs that basically people don't know what to do with. They could be volume backs, they could be RB1s, they could crush you. I have him in the same tier as David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, J.K. Dobbins, Antonio Gibson. Yeah, that's a risky freaking tier. It's a risky tier of running backs. That could the bottom fall out between any one of those guys? Possibly. Could all of those guys also garner the early down work, enough pass game work, and opportunity shares to beat their ADPs? Yes, absolutely as well.
And taking a step back, like you mentioned that tier, some of them, their bottoms might fall out, but I think it's a lower percentage in years past. Like we've talked, we've seen studies and over the last few years of the running back dead zone, right?
Yep.
And how like the Mike Davis was the quintessential example last year where he was going in the end of the 5th round, and
Chris Carson too, baby.
and those were the type of players that like we need to take a step back and say, no, like those were riskier plays than the players you just mentioned, like Antonio Gibson, even though his floor and his ceiling took hits this offseason with the signing of JD McKissick and the drafting of Brian Robinson. The reality is he's still going to be a bottom end running back too in most formats week to week. Same thing with like, as long as J.K. Dobbins doesn't start on the pup and everything like trends the right way, he's going to get a decent amount of work. Miles Sanders, like he just got unlucky in the touchdown department last year. He's still going to get he's got to
score, right? Like eventually he's got to score a damn touchdown, right? Like, come on.
So like you mentioned those players, but I don't hate any of those players in that spot in a similar way that it was so obvious over the last few years that some of those players, and maybe it's us fading a little bit of the wide receivers and noticing that a lot of wide receivers change teams and there's more uncertainty on that front. But like, I don't hate some of those running backs where they're going in the 5th round and the 6th rounds of your one quarterback best ball drafts right now. So, you know, even being a little higher on those running backs, maybe this is where the strategy of drafting your wide receivers round 1 and round 2, unless you get a Najee Harris to fall to you, or you let a Christian McCaffrey, because I've seen in some one quarterback leagues McCaffrey fall to 5, fall to 6, and that's where you just smash. Like if you can get any of the values that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, that's where you take your running backs. But other than that, I think that with all of these values dropping to the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds of your drafts, that's where you hammer like the wide receiver or the running backs this year right now.
Well, and I think it's a perfect point. And where I tier a lot of these running backs and the way that I look at them based off of how you're drafting, where you're drafting, and how the draft falls to you, I'm usually taking one of 3 different approaches. And this goes to redraft, this goes to best ball. For me, it's either I'm going hero, I'm going bimodal, which basically means I'm going running back, and then I'm going to hammer wide receivers for the next few rounds, if not like not touch the running back position until round 9 or 10, or I'm going to go 0 RB. And these running backs in this range are build running backs. They are going to fit a particular build of your roster. Am I going to garner these running backs if I'm going hero? No. Am I going to go after these running backs considering the range that they're going in if I'm going with bimodal? No. But am I going to get them if I'm going 0, or could they fit a hero RB build if they fall down the board and you get them as a value around maybe 2 later? If you're in a room that's just like, running backs. I love wide receivers, which is basically every damn underdog draft, because underdog is, and I love underdog. I'm not shading underdog. But if anybody is drafted on underdog, it's a microcosm of Twitter. If there's a guy trending on Twitter, he goes up in ADP that day. If people say they hate this guy on Twitter, then he goes down. If everybody says on Twitter that they hate these running backs or whatever, it's why underdog is so thirsty. And it's not just like for wide receivers, and it's not just like, I'm not shading wide receivers. Going wide receiver heavy is good. I'm talking about it with people, and I'm saying to do that. But this is all to say that you can get values like this, and in this tier of running backs, they're not your typical dead zone backs. They're not. Right. Like, we're not putting all of our hopes and dreams on the back of a 28-year-old journeyman running back, or one of these has been beat up running backs that has been dealing with injuries, and we're like, well, somebody's got to run the ball. That the same thing as the narrative of, well, somebody's got to catch the ball. Both of them are pretty shitty narratives to follow in drafts, so don't do that. But these running backs don't really fit the build, man. Like, I wrote this up in my mid-round strategy. I said, okay, when in round 6 or 7, go back to the running back position and grab your RB2, grab your RB3. If some of these running backs, and I laid out a few names, fall to you in that range. They're not your typical dead zone backs. Right. They're being hated on, which I understand the concerns, but again, we go back to the conversation of it's baked into their damn ADP. So you're not having to draft them in the 3rd or 4th round. They're not your typical dead zone running backs. So yeah, I mean, I'm willing to draft them if it fits my team build and they fall to me in the draft. I'm not going to reach for them, and I'm not going to take them if I go like 2 running backs early. So I don't hate them, but it really comes down to team and roster construction if I'm going to draft them.
That is totally there. One of the things that I want to point out, the running backs that are in that spot, we know they're good at football. Mm-hmm. Their stats from the previous years, their opportunity were not drawn from someone else was out, like Antonio Gibson. It wasn't that someone else was out and Antonio Gibson got the work, or J.K. Dobbins. We know that they're certifiably good at football, whereas we were not sure if Mike Davis is actually good at football. He just got the opportunity, the Christian McCaffrey opportunity in Carolina, and too much projection was going into that. But Derek, I want to pick your brain about, I think the most difficult running back right now to draft, because I've wavered between drafting a lot of Alvin Kamara and drafting no Alvin Kamara due to the legal situation that may or may not be settled before the season or during the season, after the season. Certainly this is a legal situation that will play itself out, and we'll find, more details as all those proceedings happen. But how are we as fantasy players supposed to manage the drafting and maybe a portfolio of Alvin Kamara?
Tread carefully. That's one of the best ways I could say it. I will probably not, unless things change or we do get information sooner rather than later. I can't see Alvin Kamara being a running back that I'll be heavily exposed to in really any format, because there's a few red flags with Alvin Kamara. Not just the offensive system, if they're putting more players around him, he's still going to get a healthy target share if he's out there, and I still think obviously he's going to get the goal line work and things like that. The red flags for Alvin Kamara are, yes, the suspension is looming. The other part about Alvin Kamara is that if you look at some of his efficiency numbers, and not through the passing game, but yards after contact per attempt, he looks like a running back that's slowing down, in the sense that not so much injury-wise, but his yards after contact per attempt, I want to say off the top of my head, they've dropped in each of the last, it's either 3 or 4 seasons. And so some of these little, like, reading the tea leaves about production and efficiency and things of that nature also kind of weigh into the equation for a running back that's not 25 years old, a running back that's also facing suspension, possibly. And the other thing we need to talk about, Brad, is that this is not just like him facing a suspension, and there are certain teams where we get, I'm not going to say we get news earlier, but things hit the wire, whether that's right, the agent, the team feeling fine with giving things away, or media personalities are closer to other teams than they are front office executives. So they get these little nuggets and they come out into the media stream. The Saints are not one of those damn teams, dude. No. And this is not me just being a homer for anybody that's looking back here and noticing Saints memorabilia. No. This is in their recent history, man. Like, if you go back to previous suspensions, Mark Ingram was suspended by the league and appealed the damn thing before we even knew he was suspended. Right. So can we rule out that a smart organization that is like, you are not going to talk about a damn thing, in the past doesn't do that again, and we get heavy exposure to Alvin Kamara, and we find out, oh, they've actually known for weeks that he's been suspended, and he's already appealed it. Those things are in the range of outcomes. So for me, I'm probably going to be below the field on Alvin Kamara. There's too many other running backs that kind of go in his range in the late first, early second, that have the same type of range of outcomes. Like, in that range, you can get DeAndre Swift, you can get Saquon Barkley, you can get, Austin Eckler doesn't usually fall there, but maybe Joe Mixon falls there. You can get all of these other running backs that have that I have in the same tier, that have similar range of outcomes that Alvin Kamara does. And some of them are younger, some of them are possibly better offenses. Or in the case of Saquon, I think that his ceiling is much higher than Alvin Kamara. So, yeah, I mean, this is a long, blowhard way of me saying that I will be below the field with Alvin Kamara this year.
I think we'll be below the field on Michael Thomas as well for similar reasons. You mentioned that they'll keep it close to the vest. We didn't know that there were all these issues with Michael Thomas either. I know this is running backs, but just to hit on that point that the Saints keep things very close and very tight and handle a lot of things internally, between the players. So, Alvin Kamara, he did handle a career high in rush attempts last season because there was no one else behind him. Like, you're not going to bank on like Tony Jones, and you're not going to bank on a 33-year-old Mark Ingram to take carries away from Alvin Kamara.
Well, with that point specifically, I think a lot of that had to do with their offensive design last year. They basically said, if you looked at how the Saints offense ran just overall, they basically said, our offense is terrible. Our offense is total dog shit. The way that we're going to win games is we're going to play slow as hell. We're going to play defense. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to try to grind you out.
And Alvin Kamara is not a between the tackles grinder. Like, that's not where he's most successful.
No, absolutely. And the other thing that needs to get thrown in here too, Brad, is that with the offensive design, how they ran the ball, his rushing volume, things of that nature, their offensive line played terrible last year.
Yeah.
Their offensive line, which had been like an elite run blocking unit, an elite unit just in general, fell off a table. It was really bad last year. And so I think a lot of the rushing attempts for Alvin Kamara were by design of how they wanted to run the offense. I don't project that's how they're going to do it this year, but considering a lot of the risk that is involved in Alvin Kamara, which the other thing we need to talk about, we talked about players where the risk is being baked into their ADP. It's not being baked into Alvin Kamara's ADP. Like,
not
you don't see him going, no, I mean, I can make you an easy case, not at all. In the sense that he still goes in the first round of a lot of drafts, if not there, the top of the second. And if we're talking about the risk and being baked into his ADP, Alvin Kamara, if we're talking about a 4 to 6 game suspension, he should be, I mean, even in the rosiest case of circumstances, a late second pick, probably more of a third round pick right now, considering if we're breaking some of that into his range of outcomes. Hell, maybe, I mean, if it's the 6 game realm, he should be in the back end of the 4th right now. So I don't think any of these things are being factored into this, especially the suspension being factored into his ADP nearly enough, if any, right now. So I'm more willing to take, and everybody's name of choice is Abram Smith, which I don't disagree with that. Take your shots. He's free in best ball right now.
Yeah.
But tell me why we're not willing to draft Mark Ingram. I understand he's old as dirt. I get that. But this team loves Mark Ingram. Last year when Alvin Kamara was out, Mark Ingram played all the damn time.
Yep.
And there's nobody on this depth chart, even if you love Abram Smith, even if you love him, he's a freaking UDFA, man. Like, and they have what? Dwayne Washington, which has been around there forever. They've never given him any work.
Nope.
Who's there? Like, let's play this out. Let's talk about this for a second.
Sure.
If Alvin Kamara misses time, then why the hell aren't we in on Mark Ingram more? If he gives you 4 to 6 weeks of bell cow production, he's going to pay off his ADP. His win rate walking out of this season is going to be fantastic because he's not expensive. Nobody wants to draft him. So it's an easy way to differentiate your teams if you're playing Best Ball Mania 3, if you're playing these large field tournaments and the big dog when that comes out. There's so many ways of variance because the other part of that, Brad, is that we're not baking in the Alvin Kamara suspension. So that's also not being baked into Mark Ingram's ADP. So if the suspension comes to light, Mark Ingram's ADP is going to shoot through the damn roof. So if you want exposure to this offense and Mark Ingram right now, now's the time to draft him. And you can continue drafting him all the way through the season and just play the outcome of, okay, well, Alvin Kamara misses time. If I get 3 to 4 games out of a late round pick, which I'd even have to go and look up where his best ball ADP is right now.
On Underdog, it's 212.
Exact. He's free. He's the last pick of a damn draft.
Last round. Yep.
He is legitimate. It's insane. Like, I have a lot of Mark Ingram right now, and people are going to hate
As you
that. They're
should.
going to say. But the thing about it is, like, tell me the downside case scenario
There's
for the
none.
last pick. The last pick.
There's none. Because Mark Ingram last year, so he played 14 games, 4 instances where he was a top 24 running back and a weekly finish. Like, you're getting that as your last round pick. Like,
and those were all what, when he was with the Saints, or at least I think what, 2 or 3 of the 4?
It was 3 of the 4. The first game 1 was with the Texans, right? But the other weeks he was with the Saints and was a top 24 back 3 games during that span. And he's a 30-something-year-old. He did that at 30-something years old. But here's the thing, Derek. His player profiler comp, Frank Gore. Frank Gore does not die. Like, it took forever for Frank Gore to
Mark
retire.
Ingram, man.
Mark Ingram is not going to go away. He is the affectionately the cockroach of the NFL. He's not going to go away. So no, I'm agreeing with you. Mark Ingram is the late round play here.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of exposure to him, man, and I don't really understand. You don't hear anybody talking about him either. People talk about the suspension of Alvin Kamara. They kind of like kick the can around with that. And people are like, "Oh man, Abram Smith, let's go, Abram Smith." And I'm like, "Do you realize that Abram Smith is
just
most
shiny
likely?"
toy.
It's we're still in the rookies are the new hotness. Okay,
Right.
Abram Smith is still a freaking UDFA. Abram Smith is still down the depth chart. Abram Smith is probably going to play a good bit of special teams because yes, he has the linebacking background.
Yep.
Could he factor into the backfield? Sure, but to say that he is at least the RB2 on this team is nonsense. He's not going to be the RB2 on this team if Ingram stays healthy. That's not happening. This team also told you what they think about Mark Ingram last year after they added him to the roster, Brad.
Yep.
They gave him a contract extension.
They did, which is wild.
Which is wild. I mean, we might think it's insane.
Him, and then they gave him the contract. They gave.
We might think that's insane, but the team is telling you what they think. And he is going to be, and we saw this play out last year, he's going to be the guy that is going to take the work if Alvin Kamara is out, man. So, yeah, I'm in on Mark Ingram, and people could stub their nose at that, but I am.
All right. Well, we'll finish with a couple more running backs. Darrell Williams just signed with the Arizona Cardinals a couple weeks ago. I'm a big fan of Darrell Williams. So, Derek, I know you're a little lower. I don't know if you've had a chance to update the specific Darrell Williams, but I did projections for the Arizona Cardinals. I projected James Conner to still be, a top 10 back, but Conner only got, the 50+% of the carries when Chase Edmonds was out. And we see the comps between Chase Edmonds and Darrell Williams, the higher percent target share. Yes, he may not be, rushing the ball as much, but I could see a 15-20% rush share for Darrell Williams and a 7-8% target share on a good Arizona offense. And especially if James Conner goes down, Darrell Williams for me is one of those anchor or zero RB must-haves on my roster. The offense plus the role we know James Conner has, that if Williams steps in, it's wheels up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any shade for Darrell Williams. I'd have to go see where I have him in my ranks. It's probably a little bit low because some of these tier guys, I raise and lower these guys because you can make a case for a lot of these guys here. Dear Lord, where is Darrell Williams in my ranks? He is probably pretty far down there. But for me, I agree with you. I agree with you, Brad. Like, I think you can make the easy case for Darrell Williams. Because here's the other thing. Again, we talked about like everybody wanting the rookie hype and rookie love and stuff. Everybody's still like a certain amount of Keontae Ingram, but we talk about teams telling you what they think. If Arizona loved Keontae Ingram so much, then why the hell did they go sign Darrell Williams?
Yep.
Legitimately, I think Arizona's approach to the running back position is we want a guy that can play all 3 downs. We want a guy that can play in the passing game, and we're willing to take a little bit less explosiveness and a little more safety, and we know what this guy is over some of those other factors.
and they're willing to wait out the market, frankly. That's what they did last year with James Conner. If you remember, Conner did not sign right away with the Arizona Cardinals, and he was a high impact player, played a lot of snaps, a veteran. And then Darrell Williams now, yes, he's a veteran, but last year he was a top 27 PPR points per game running back on an offense that the Chiefs needed him in some games. They used him down the field. He was able to catch some passes from Mahomes and was fantasy useful. I think he was like running back 18 in total PPR points. I know that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he ended up having like gallbladder surgery or something, kidney surgery. I don't know what it was, but that was talk about another team that kept things close to the vest. Like, we didn't know a lot of the issues with Tyreek Hill. We didn't know a lot of contractually. We didn't know a lot about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So Darrell Williams, I think he, as I said, he's one of those running backs like Darrell Williams, Donta Foreman, Darrell Henderson, Isaiah Spiller. Those are the types of players that I'm just rotating through my drafts and just smashing whoever comes to me, especially in those like anchor or hero RB builds.
Yeah, I mean, I found Darrell. I wasn't that low on him. He's a little bit higher than I thought I had him. I have him and Ingram right back to back with each other. Ingram is RB 47 and Darrell Williams is RB 48. So, and they're in the same tier of like all those handcuff guys. Like Madison's right ahead of them. Darrell Henderson. I actually have and this is a name that some people I don't think are really drafting a lot or really talking about too, is that I have Kenyan Drake in that same tier.
Oh, like, yes. Thank you. Kenyan Drake, baby.
Yep.
He's been one of my favorite round 18, round 17, round 20 picks. Oh,
I have him in RB at RB 44 in the same kind of range. It's really all of these undervalued handcuffs in the sense of people, you have the sexy names of handcuffs that everybody's like, oh, I like that guy. I need Tony. Yeah, damn right. That was the first name I was going to was Tony Pollard, man. There's a sexy handcuff range, man. I mean, it's the Tony Pollards, the Kareem Hunts, you know, like those guys that people love. Hell, even Devin Singletary and stuff like that. Like, people love to draft them, and I'm like, there are guys that are free in best ball that have the same range of outcomes as those players, except you're not paying for the upside. And it's Mark Ingram, it's Darrell Williams, it's Sony Michel, who is free right now. You know, all those guys have the same type of range of outcomes. You know, people are paying for Rashad White. Tell me why people like Khalil Herbert. You know, we need to play the range of outcomes with all of these cuff backs and not only take the values on players that aren't being drafted as much as the other handcuffs, but take the idea of there's a lot of it we're going to get wrong. We think we know who's going to be the handcuff, but playing the range of outcomes, like, I don't have a lot of Khalil Herbert because I don't like the range that he's going in right now. But I'll tell you one thing, I have one massive shit ton of Tristan Ebner. I have a lot of him. I have a lot of Ebner, dude. I look at him as like basically he is the discount possible Nyheim Hines, and he could be a discount 3 down back because unlike Nyheim Hines, he has the size to play on all 3 downs.
Right.
And he is really, really damn good in the passing game. So I've used him as a stack partner with Justin Fields late in best ball drafts and saying that if he possibly hits, it's probably through the passing game. But if he really hits, he could be a 3 down back, and he could be really freaking good in the passing game in an offense that I'm telling you they're going to scheme up more screens in this offense this year. That's what Getsy did in Green Bay. That's what they did in Green Bay. That's what they need to do in Chicago. So there's going to be a pass catching back. Who else are
they going to throw the ball to? It's going to be
David Montgomery is terrible in the passing game. He is wretchedly inefficient in the passing game. So I think that we could see an easy case scenario where David Montgomery is regulated to the early down role in this offense. And his direct handcuff for the early down role would be Khalil Herbert. Tristan Ebner could easily have standalone value from week 1, and nobody's drafting him, dude. Nobody.
And he's guaranteed to start on special teams. He played really well on special. He's going to get snaps on the field. And then if he carves out that third down role on a new regime, like that drafted, well, I can't remember.
Which have no allegiances to Herbert. That regime has no
Montgomery.
Allegiances. Or Montgomery. They
Right.
have no allegiances. And I don't think people factor that in enough. They're like, I love David Montgomery. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, but do the Bears.
That regime that drafted
That's the
him
question.
is gone. He's a
Yep.
free agent after this year. They have said they want to go to more zone running. They have brought in guys that quietly fit the zone scheme better than David Montgomery. Darrington Evans fits that scheme better than David Montgomery. Tristan Ebner fits that scheme better than David Montgomery. So tell me why those guys couldn't be the RB2 over Khalil Herbert.
Shares of David Montgomery over
I have
the
none.
course of,
I have none.
I've done over 100 drafts and I have 0 David Montgomery.
None. I have none. But I have a good bit of Darrington Evans. I have a good bit of Tristan Ebner because they're free. They're free.
Yep.
Like, I don't think especially if you're, and I'm talking a lot about underdog, and we're getting off tangent here, but it's a part that we're talking about running backs, Brad, I want to bring up.
Yeah.
If you're drafting on underdog, and as thirsty as the draft rooms are for wide receivers, who are the wide receivers you're loving when you get to the 15th to 18th round? Who the hell is that? And how often do we see wide receiver breakouts
Almost never.
in the NFL in that type of range
Almost
of
never.
ADP? In the sense of guys that are going to give you multiple spike weeks or are going to come out of the woodwork and command significant and meaningful target shares.
Almost never.
Exactly. Your probability of hitting on that is damn near nil. If you do hit on it, I mean, really, you're tossing darts and it's saying, I got 10 darts, maybe one of them hits. How often
It's
can you
it's
tell
way
me?
lower than that.
Oh,
but-
it's less than that. It's way less than that. I'm giving people a little bit of hope for their bad draft strategies. But
don't
for
do that.
me-
Dash the hope, Derek.
well,
Dash the hope.
I'm about to dash it. I'm going to build them up and break them down. You know, we're gonna do that this way. I'm going to break you down and then rebuild you back up into a better basketball player.
There you go.
The way it goes, man, is like those final 3 picks. Take your shot on running backs. There are free running backs littered throughout that range of ADP that are either not being talked about, not being discussed, that have a range of outcomes to, like we talk about, there's Mark Ingram, there's Tristan Ebner, there's Darrington Evans, there's a bunch of other running backs that are in
As
that
the
type
Green
of range
Bay
of outcomes.
homer, Kylan Hill, you rotate through
Yep.
him. Goodson, Tyler Goodson, undrafted free agent.
If we're wrong, if Keyshawn Vaughn is the second running back and it's not Rashad White, we could be wrong, dude.
I
We
was
could.
way overweight on Keyshawn Vaughn pre-draft, but we've seen Keyshawn Vaughn as a rookie fail as a third round pick. It's very possible that it's the same thing with Rashad White, and then it's Keyshawn Vaughn getting some Ronald Jones role.
Well, there's a ton of other guys that are down there on depth charts that I think if we're playing, like I talked about, the range of outcomes. 2 other names that I'll bring up real fast, man, is I am drafting a lot of Craig Reynolds as well because he played extremely well last year in efficiency metrics. There's a range of outcomes where, say, DeAndre Swift goes down, that Craig Reynolds is the RB2 and it's not Jamal Williams. It's possible, man. As well as I think you could still take shots, although it's definitely muted my love for Derek Gore a good bit with them bringing Jarrett McKinnon. I'll take a few shots on him late. Or if you wanted to go in Marlon Mack as a guy, like everybody wants to draft Dameon Pierce and players that. But Mack
Dameon Pierce, in his 13 games at Florida that last season, 11 of those were single-digit carry games. Like, he doesn't have the pedigree of carrying a load. Like, it's Marlon Mack, but if you're not in on Mack, maybe it's Dario Gumbawale. Maybe it's Rex Burkhead. Like,
yeah, I mean, but this is all to tell people that there are ranges of outcomes, and if you're attacking these large field tournaments, or if you have like a 16-team league or something like that, and you get to these final 2 rounds, take the dart throw running backs. Because we see injuries happen not only early in the season and training camp, all throughout. Hell, we're projecting depth charts right now. Like we're talking about Chicago's depth chart. We could all be wrong. And that's
it
fine.
could be
but we
Darrington Evans as the running back.
It could be. It could be, man. And this is not just like and people can go find the timeline, search it, all that kind of stuff. Yes, I'm a Darrington Evans truther. I'll admit that. I'm not gonna lie about that. Go search it. It's fine. It's cool. I'm not deleting shit.
Right.
I believe in his talent. I believe that we only haven't seen that talent because he's been hurt the entirety of his NFL career.
Right.
So to say that a new regime brought in a litany of running backs behind David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert, we need to play ranges of outcomes with our drafts and best ball specifically, but also your deeper leagues or redraft leagues, man. Like your final 2 picks in every redraft league, unless you're forced to take a kicker or defense, don't draft them. Don't be the schmo that drafts kicker and defense. Don't worry about that shit. Take running backs that are in training camp that are 1 injury away, 2 injury away from seeing the NFL field. And there's another running back. You talked about him earlier, and I'm going to give you some love with that one. We have not discussed him yet, but another player that I'm massively over consensus on is Isaiah Spiller. Like, I have him as a top 36 running back right now. And
I love it.
I don't care that people have him ranked in the 50s. I'm projecting it differently, and this is not me trying to be different, things like that. The Chargers have wanted to preserve Austin Eckler for multiple seasons. The fact of it is that Larry Roundtree has sucked. Joshua Kelly has sucked. And they haven't had a running back. And Justin Jackson is gone. Yep. And Justin Jackson himself couldn't even stay healthy. So now they have Isaiah Spiller in there. So tell me, like, this is one of the best offenses in the NFL. Austin Eckler goes down. We know that Larry Roundtree will not be the guy. We know that Josh Kelly is not going to be the guy. And I'm talking about range of outcomes, and people don't want to push back and say, you just talked about playing range of outcomes, and now you're dealing uncertainties with these other 2 running backs. The paradigm is a little bit different in the sense that we've seen them fall on their face. We've seen them fall on their face with this regime.
We know what we have in Joshua Kelly, and it's not good. He's inefficient plotter who doesn't catch passes, and Isaiah Spiller can catch passes, and he can
they told
fit
you what
that
they thought about
of the Austin Eckler role. Those other players are not going to fit it.
Well, the thing about it is, Brad, is that we talked about regimes and trying to read the tea leaves of when they show us their hand, which is free agency in the NFL draft.
Yes.
This team went out and drafted Isaiah Spiller with not amazing draft capital, but decent enough to where, okay, like, yeah, 3rd, 4th round running backs can have a role from week 1. I'm not telling you that he's going to beat out Austin Eckler for the damn starting job, but he could have a standalone role on one of the best offenses in the NFL that's going to be in the red zone at probably a top 5, top 10 rate. And if he steals away some of the touchdowns, if he gets more run down the stretch to keep Eckler fresh for the playoffs for a team that really has signaled they're going all in and they have Super Bowl aspirations. Hell, if Eckler goes down, and I don't want that to happen. I love Austin Eckler as a player. I love him as a content creator, all of these different things. Definitely. I don't want injuries for him. Okay, I'm not saying that. But if he does sustain an injury, Isaiah Spiller could easily be a player that we're ranking as a top 10 running back until Eckler comes back. If Eckler was out for the entire season, or Isaiah Spiller would be drafted as a top 12 back right now. He would be.
I think so. And even if, we're projecting injury, but Eckler hasn't stayed healthy these last few years. He's always missed games. And if he's used over the course of the season and he gets more injured, and your week 17 matchup is the LA Chargers versus the LA Rams, fireworks. It's within the range of outcomes. You mentioned Isaiah Spiller, top 12. He could be a top 6 running back that week.
Yep.
In that type of shootout scenario, he's a running back that I want on my teams.
I think this all comes to stand, man, is that, and I know we're talking a lot about best ball. With redraft leagues, but
he's the ones you stash. You just stash on and you let sit, and as long as you don't have Austin Eckler, because I'm hoping I would not be drafting him. Yeah, you fall into the correct camp of draft other people's handcuffs, right, Derek?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'm not double wrapping it with.
That
with
was
a
trending
backfield.
2 weeks ago on Twitter.
Yeah,
draft your own handcuff. No.
No, I'm not double wrapping it on a backfield. I'm not doing that. It's just not going to happen, man. I'll take the variance, and you really try to spread out the darts. And the thing about it is that you're making the bet. Okay, like if one of these, if multiple ones hit at various times, you're getting the spike week performances, and you're getting guys that are probably going to end with high win rates when we look back on the season.
Right.
You know, so
the Darrell Hendersons of the world, right? Cam Akers goes
Yep.
down, boom. Darrell Henderson
Yep.
is 50% of his games. He's getting 15 or more PPR fantasy points.
Yep, absolutely. And one last point on it as far as from best ball approach, but you're playing these large field tournaments. You need to be at least getting weird with some of these last picks and getting players that the rest of the field, like in Best Ball Mania 3, dude, you're playing against almost 500,000 people. Like, to take that down, you not only need like the best run peer of your damn life, but you also need to be different from the field when you get to week 17. And I was top 5 in drafters last year, their big tournament and stuff, and I ended up getting 4th in it. But you get to these final weeks and you're looking at the top of the board. You're looking at the top of the board for Best Ball Mania. You're looking at the top of the board in Puppy, whatever. And you're saying, all right, every team that made it this far has these same 3 or 4 players.
The core. Yeah.
That's fine. If those guys go out and they ball out, all 5 you look at it as a GPP. All 5 or 10 of us are all going to the top of the board. But who is the player that I have on my roster that none of them have, or one of them have? Who are the 3 players on my roster that these top 5 guys don't have? These top 5 girls and guys don't have. Who do I have that can push me over the top that nobody else has exposure to? And when you're playing against that large of a field, hell, even if you're playing on drafters, which I love drafters. I'm going to probably max enter their contests and stuff like that because of the smaller field size. I think they're plus EV contests. You're playing against these fields. Who do you have on your rosters that other players don't have? That means the difference between you getting 5th and you getting 1st is going to be massive. So it's not just, what do we care about with stacks? What do we care about with roster constructions? What do we care about with week 17 correlations? All those things are really important. But if you want to ship the damn thing, if you really want to take it down and get the damn bag, you are going to need some players to hit that not everybody else has. And whether that's they hit for 1 week or they hit for 5 weeks or they carry your ass for the entire season as being this year's James Robinson or Elijah Mitchell or whoever, that's going to be the difference between taking down a millie and getting 10th place.
Derek, we'll end with that. That was awesome. Really appreciate you jumping on and talking running back rankings and strategy, both in redraft and in best ball. You can check out Derek's rankings on Fantasy Pros, regularly updates them throughout the offseason. Also, Derek, give us some more plugs for Fantasy Pros and your work there.
Shameless plug time. I love this time. So Fantasy Pros, you need to be heading there today. Go to fantasypros.com. The redraft kit in its mountainous glory is live. So strategy, our perfect drafts from all the other analysts, how I'm approaching early, middle, late rounds. A lot of the points that I made, but a lot of other points that we didn't discuss in the show are all in that redraft kit, plus a ton of other amazing work. So if you're getting ready for redraft, you're already considering how many leagues you're going to be in, please go there. Please get there today. Get into our Discord. You can bug me with questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I say bug, kidding, because I love interacting with our awesome Discord community over at Fantasy Pros, as well as we have talked a lot, probably more than I think you maybe anticipated, Brett, but we talked a lot about best ball. The best ball kit over at Fantasy Pros is live as well, and if you're still in the Dynasty streets, you're doing startups because it is startup season. The Dynasty kit is also live on the site, so we're covering you for whatever the hell you want to do with fantasy goodness, whether you want to do Dynasty startup season, you want to go to the best ball streets, or you're just getting ready to beat down the office league again for redraft. One-stop shop, baby. FantasyPros.com. I'm on the main podcast, as well as I'm kicking off this month. I'm going to have a team series, which is not your normal like team preview series. Those are tired. They're not wired. They're boring as shit. Mine is going to be just simple. It's going to be basically what I want you to take away from this is it's a stat series. I'm going to give you a bunch of stats that I think are actionable nuggets on teams, players for these teams, and then give you what I think and why I included them in there. Quick reads, actionable takeaways for your drafts, no matter what your format is. And that's what I want people to not have to go through the doldrums of reading all 2,000 words, 5,000 or 7,000 words on a freaking team. Right. I want you to be able to look at this, say, okay, this, go crush a draft. Look at this. If you're stacking the Chiefs, if you're stacking Eagles, this, go crush a draft. And really just enjoy it.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check out all of the things that Derek mentioned there, Redraft Fantasy and Best Ball. Here at Best Ball Fantasy, I just launched the website yesterday, so I'll shamelessly plug myself there. If you haven't subscribed to the Best Ball Fantasy YouTube channel, make sure you do. And of course, give the podcast 5 stars on the Apple. My wife loves seeing those 5 stars. We know how it keeps the spouses happy with all of the goodness there. And there are some other things that Best Ball Fantasy is going to be throwing your way this summer. So keep attuned there. Make sure you check out the website, put in all the subscriptions there. And thank you so much, Derek, for popping in. Appreciate chatting about the running backs and finally getting you on the podcast here.
Thanks, Brad, man. This was awesome. I love at this time of year, not only just talking running backs, but a lot of best ball theory, a lot of the things we covered and stuff like that. It just, it seamlessly kind of weaved into the conversation that we're having on a lot of these different players, man. Sure. So good talk. Fantastic episode. Love getting to chop it up with you, man. And honestly, can't wait to do it again, dude.
Sounds great. All right. For Derek, I'm Bradley, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Good luck, everyone, in the best ball streets.